Hello and welcome to Digital Construction Conversations, brought to you by MBS. I'm your host, Paul Swaddle, and every episode I'll be talking to interesting people connected to the digital construction industry. Today my guests are the one-of-a-kind partnership of Dr. Beth Eleni and Dr. Eleni Papadonikolaki, founding partners of Digital Outlook, bringing cutting-edge research on digital transformation from other industries into the built environment to evolve the next generation of digital engineers. Dr. Beth and Dr. Eleni have published widely on building information modelling and organisational change, developing a unique co-perspective on the future of construction. Dr. Beth is an honorary lecturer at University College London, combining management skills with vast industry expertise. As Director of Research and Innovation at Constructing Excellence, Beth was part of the Avanti project, a key foundation of modern BIM process, so I was keen to ask her how much has really changed. Dr. Eleni is Associate Professor in Digital Innovation and Management at UCL's Bartlett, teaching at a range of levels. Eleni's research spans management, social science and engineering, and practical BIM process from her background as an architect and design manager. I always enjoy hearing Eleni speak on innovation and supply chains and her forward-thinking views on the digital economy and blockchain. Their executive education program informs digital transformation through a method called the Harvard Teaching Case, used in business schools across the world, but being pioneered by Digital Outlook as a way of improving soft skills or socio-technical skills, specifically for built environment professionals. Here's my encouraging and enlightening conversation with Dr. Beth Morgan and Dr. Eleni Papadonikolaki. We're seeing a generation of digital engineers and students who are digital natives in the way that they work. Is that the change that's needed to move the industry on?
So we've been working with established industry sort of professionals in all sorts of leadership. So when we talk about leadership, we're not just talking about sort of C-suite execs, we're talking about project leaders, we're talking about leaders in supply chains, leaders in teams, etc., etc. So we've had multiple levels within these sessions, and there has been generally in the senior leaders, there's been this recognition that they need to develop better digital literacy. So there is a level of skills that you need to make decisions about whether you use digital tools. But also one of the messages that we like to enforce is that digital is just a tool. It's a solution to a business problem. So you don't start with a technology. So that's there. There's a recognition amongst the sort of your traditional senior leaders that they are slightly out of their comfort zone. There's also a recognition that they need better processes to allow bottom-up digital innovations to come, and a lot of the bright ideas come from the more junior staff, often working at the coalface. So that recognition has happened. I hope, and I think we will see that bearing fruit in the next few years, that actually there is this change and a recognition amongst established organisations. I think the reality is that if it doesn't happen, then some organisations are going to really struggle. They're going to be really disrupted because, as you say, there are a generation of digital natives coming into the industry, and they're not interested in the old ways of doing things. They're going to disrupt these firms that can't change and won't change.
And we potentially lose them to other sectors or industries that attract those individuals.
Yeah, absolutely.
From my side, with regards to the pandemic and how it's changing the work, Beth talked a bit about Digital Outlook and the executive education we're offering through that. So as we described at the beginning, because of the pandemic, we did a lot of that online. And there are two main themes that I like, and I think that they might push the change better. One has to do with pluralism, so it's not only one tool. And the same way also in digital construction, we should forget about one tool to give all the solutions. Some people think that, one particular vendor's product, that's all you need, but it's far from that in reality. The same with, like the teleconferences we're doing, we have all these platforms like Teams, Zoom, and so on, and we have all these different online whiteboards that we're using, and we start training ourselves in different functionalities. So one is that the pluralism that we have to understand and take into account for the future as well. There are many tools that are coming, and we should be able to play around with all of them. And the second one, it's this play I mentioned, this playfulness, because most of these, they're very gamified. They're in a way that it attracts people. The UX, it's becoming better and better. The functionalities are becoming better and better. They give a more light or free way of collaborating and interacting with others. Now, if you think that, for example, if we had these types of meetings in a face-to-face, everyone would be buttoned up and, with a certain etiquette. But now this online etiquette, it allows also more freedom. We definitely need both, to have both of these two words, but I think we're getting some lessons around this freedom, this playfulness, and also the pluralism that perhaps can help the digital leaders essentially to understand why it's needed and where it will be going in the future.
One thing that you mentioned there is this kind of pluralism of all kinds of different tools and methods and processes that are required, and obviously evolving standards and regulations as well. How do you test and determine what to teach, so that you're remaining current and teaching things that are going to be useful in 5 years' time, but equally not getting caught up in the latest trend or the latest buzzword, that the industry is talking about?
So yes, we are an industry of buzzwords and acronyms. I think in terms of remaining current, our teaching to executives and to students, but particularly to executives, is incredibly important. And the reality is, of course, we learn a lot about them as well. And that's where I spoke earlier about this relationship between industry and academia. I really think it's a virtuous one, and academia has to learn from industry as well as vice versa. I think we research, Eleni and I publish a lot together. So we've just published a chapter about digital innovations in mega projects. Yeah. And the different digital pathways, which takes a very longitudinal view, because you're absolutely right. We have to know, we have to be at the forefront of what's going on.
An area of particular interest to me is your teaching method and this idea of the Harvard case study or the teaching case method, and that teaching skills that are needed maybe takes you beyond those tools and beyond those platforms to a set of soft skills, they might be called. Is that a fair way of describing that approach?
Yeah, definitely. Because it relates to practicing and learning by doing, the participants or the students, they get to test some of these behaviors in class. Because this is an inductive way of teaching, so it's not deductive like, I'm the star and I'm lecturing you. It's more together to trying to understand and create meaning. And at the same time, because it's a safe environment, it's good for practicing these ideas, testing these ideas and practicing these skills. So you can, through this Harvard case teaching method, you can incorporate things such as negotiation activities, collaboration activities. So these are all the skills that we always say at construction it's not very good at. They're not collaborating. But if you simulate the real world situation and the environment of how this takes place, through these case teaching methods, you have already started building the expertise and started building more the confidence of the participants in doing that in their workplace as well.
Yeah, and Dr. Beth, it was fair to say that the method is new to the construction industry in a way, in terms of the way that you and Dr. Eleni have implemented it as part of Digital Outlook into the construction industry, but it is used in other sectors.
Yeah, I first came across it as a student studying for my MBA, and it was widely used as a teaching method, and I found it incredibly effective in the ways that Eleni's described, both the subject area and the group work and the collaboration and the negotiation skills that you're developing. So I've long harboured a dream of, well, actually, how could we bring this into the construction industry, which sorely needs such teaching methods. And that's what we're doing with Digital Outlook. So the teaching cases that we've produced are set within the built environment industry in very different settings. So some within organisations, some within mega projects, some within supply chains. And they look at particular issues and dilemmas related to digital transformation.
And Dr. Eleni, the same?
Yeah, definitely. I fully agree with Beth. So at the beginning, everyone, I think, globally was very stressed about how we're doing that. But there are so many tools available and so many different functionalities that actually can perform some tasks. We can perform some tasks online better than in the physical space. For example, the breakout rooms, you can't really do that in a physical space unless you have other rooms adjoined, or if you have a really big space where the groups they stay separated and you don't have noise from other groups. We had very good results, and hopefully, however, this would not be the only way forward. So we're looking for something more hybrid too.
How have you found students are coping? Do you think that there is an opportunity to broadly change digital learning across universities and colleges, or do you see a lot of face-to-face teaching still continuing for decades to come?
I think that a bit of both is best. You know, Eleni's referred to a hybrid model, and I can see that really developing as it goes on. There are many advantages to teaching online, both using synchronous sessions and asynchronous material. And obviously, there's huge advantage about numbers, about location. I think the nature of it is obviously different. And again, at the beginning, not only when we had to move to virtual teaching, not only were we looking at the tools, we will also have got much better at realising the content needs to be different.
Yeah.
So, for instance, I think Eleni is the same, will only give blocks of about 10 minutes information.
That's interesting.
That's the ideal concentration span. And then we'll break it up with a participative exercise, whereas that's online teaching, whereas face-to-face teaching, you would lecture for a lot longer, and it works because you can judge the response of the people in the room. Our work is around digital transformation of the built environment, obviously, and we're looking at all aspects of the built environment at all scales and across the life cycle of built assets. And we're looking at digital transformation that's much wider than just the technologies, and it involves the people and the process issues as well, or socio-technical issues, as we like to say.
Yeah, I like that phrase. And Eleni?
Yeah, from my side as well, I just want to reinforce a bit the built environment. Yeah. I think it's an exciting sector to be involved because it's all around us. Everything that we are doing when we're not in nature, it's in the built environment. And this is a sector which traditionally has been not very good with innovation and with digital digital technology. So that's why digital transformation is very important. I think it can make a real impact.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think, like, I'm similarly, a chartered architect, but I'm not practicing and obviously working in a software domain now, really. And it's interesting to understand that principle of it's a really useful grounding and a useful foundation for all kinds of different things. But I guess, do both of you or either of you miss practice or miss aspects of the design culture, probably in traditional architecture, as opposed to using those skills elsewhere?
Yes, I think I do. I mean, there are aspects of it I don't miss. I think that, as you say, architecture is a great degree actually to teaching transferable skills, particularly around creative problem-solving skills, and critical skills as well. And we see in a lot of students now that actually that is the thing that they struggle to learn, and we are really trying to teach them as critical skills.
Interesting.
To myself on my own career, I will always have a personal enjoyment of architecture, great architecture. So I love the RIBA do an open house weekend. I love going and looking at buildings. I love reading about it. I'll still read architectural mags. So that is there inside me, and that will always be there.
And for you, Eleni?
Yeah, definitely. I think I don't miss it, as Beth says, because you can do things if you appreciate the architecture. You can do things around that. I have also a lot of friends who are architects, so I get to discuss with them sometimes about solutions and synthesis of different problems and materials and spaces. So I get to do a little bit of that.
One thing that comes out of both of the things that I've read from you is that the application of BIM and digital construction might not be as straightforward as it sounds, that because of all of these various complexities, there are multiple challenges in how information flows across a project. So have you seen a noticeable improvement in those collaborative processes? Or are there still the same blockers and issues that are still difficult to overcome?
My PhD was looking at exactly this issue. So I spent 15 months in a major design consultancy, and I did a longitudinal study over 15 years of their attempts to essentially adopt BIM across the organisation. And in the last 2 years, they achieved more than they had in all the preceding 13 years. And the factors that really made a difference were not learning how to use the technology, that they got better at that. It was that they acknowledged it was a much wider, more disruptive issue, so that it was going to affect everybody in their jobs, from the HR people, the marketing people. So it wasn't just about the IT department. And they also have great changes in terms of leadership. They showed leadership support. So that's an enormous factor for organisations. They showed they had a lot of standards which allowed them to work between parties in the supply chain more effectively. So actually those standards don't restrict use of digital technologies. They don't restrict creativity. They enable it. They provide this framework that you can work around.
Yeah, that's such a good lesson. And I think that idea that it really does require implementation across every aspect of an organization is so important.
I think something that it's easily forgotten, and especially in construction, which is very project-based and it's very fragmented across many different tiers, it's the supply chain side. So when I did my research, I did that in the Netherlands. So I was based in the Netherlands, which is a country where the concept of supply chain it doesn't have such a negative connotation as in the UK, for example. And actually, it's called supply chain collaboration.
That's
so
interesting.
it's more collaborative, the industry there. Supply chain management is a key strategic objective. They are planning that, they're managing that. But in construction, we're not doing that so consciously or so strategically. And this is an issue because you need to understand your supply chain, because these are your co-makers, as they were saying in the Netherlands. These are the people you're going to do a project with. So they're not really your competitors. They're the people that you have to work together to find the best solutions and to align with them in order to use digital technologies and implement digital in a successful way. So that was mostly the aspect that I was looking for. And the Netherlands, where I studied, was a great setting to do this type of research, because there were many examples of how the supply chains were working together, learning from one another.
The value of technology is, of course, only realised when it's used. Mm-hmm. So all too often we focus on investing in digital tools without considering actually what happens after it. How do we get people to use it? What about the change process that's there? So that is a really, really key point. So it's a very interesting debate, though, the wider issue of measuring productivity or measuring benefits from digital technologies, because in typical businesses, that is the thing. You hear people asking for business cases and return on investment and so on. And yes, you do have to do that to an extent, but you also have to acknowledge that actually we don't know some of the benefits that technology is going to bring. There's always an element of a trip into the unknown. So we have to get this balance between quantifying and accepting that there are things that we don't know.
One thing that I wanted to find out from you both was, is it harder to quantify the role of digital construction in the built environment when it's mixed in with so many other process improvements and efficiency improvements, organizational things, project benefits, new modern methods of construction, all of these different things that are proving to grow efficiency or improve productivity? How do you begin to quantify the role of a particular process, lean or digital construction or otherwise?
Yes, that's a difficult... The answer is you can't isolate the effects of one digital technology. But it also depends, obviously, why you want to do it and what the purpose of such a measurement is and such a quantifiable benefit is. And very often it is to demonstrate, give a rule, say this is better, you will make these sorts of efficiency gains or effectiveness gains. And very often that is the purpose of a measurement. The danger is obviously it is taken too literally.
Yeah,
I think.
So what I understood from that is that we should never wait someone to teach us all these skills. And this is also something that our students should have in mind, that, okay, now we have this tool and we're teaching you about this tool, but the idea is that you teach the next tool yourself. So you don't need the academia, especially in universities, to teach tools, but you need them in order to understand about how these tools and how technology is changing the work, how it's impacting organizations, projects, supply chain, and how you can use the technology to build a business and to get business outcomes out of that, to become competitive and so on. And this is the reason why, yes, we are teaching some tools, but to an extent. We don't think we are training providers as universities, and we are there to develop leaders. And something that I always say to the students is that you need to be able to train yourself as you move out of the university to the workplace, to a new job, to the next job. You need to have this mindset and to be able to continue learning. And this is something that they're doing in other industries. a lot, like software engineering. They have one language, and then the next year there's another language which comes and does things more efficient or in a different approach. So this is a process that the people who are in the market now, they should be learning more. And I think this is generationally, this is something that we've seen also with previous generations, like they were only working in one position, for example, for the whole of their life. Absolutely. Like in one job, 30 years in one company, which is fine. But now we know that people, they don't do that so much. So they move from one company to the other, they gain skills, they become more T-shaped. So broad, but also very detailed to some things.
That is brilliant. There's so much to pull out of that answer. One of the things, I guess, is you speak about that almost like it's a methodology for lifelong learning, or a methodology for how to train oneself in and develop your skills over the course of your career. Is that something that can be taught, in terms of there are practical ways of making that a more efficient process, or do you still find that there's some resistance, or some who won't find it as easy to be lifelong learners as others?
I think a big part of that is the willingness to admit that you don't know something. So again, if I look in practice, and we're finding this increasingly when we're working with large organizations, is that you have these junior digital natives coming into projects and firms who are incredibly enthusiastic about digital, incredibly comfortable in using it. Often, and to reiterate Eleni's point, often start with the technology rather than starting with the business problem. So it's this issue that technology is a tool. You start with a business problem, and technology isn't always the answer. But increasingly, we're seeing that more senior digital leaders don't necessarily have the confidence, the know-how, the expertise to respond to digital problems. But they have a huge amount of business experience, business acumen, project experience, and so on and so on. So it's about bridging that gap and being prepared to admit, actually, I don't know what BIM is all about, really. I need to learn, and I need to learn to the appropriate level.
And so is that a good segue, I guess, into the genesis of Digital Outlook and the work that you now do together? Can you talk about where that came from, and both of you obviously having fairly traditional roots into academia and, studying in your own rights? What was the thing that made you want to explore something slightly different outside of that?
I had long been interested partly in the relationship, getting closer between industry and academia, and was also aware of this teaching case method. So it was when at UCL I met Eleni, and we started working together, and we had lots of shared interests around both the subject area of digital transformation and other areas, this approach to teaching, that we launched it. And we worked with Skanska and Thames Tideway last year, and they were really formative projects in terms of developing this teaching method and delivering it. I was Director of Research and Innovation at Constructing Excellence, which was one of the bodies that was born out of the Latham and Egan reports. And we set up Avanti. This was back in 2002, 2003. And Avanti is level 1 BIM project. So it was one of the very early BIM projects, one of the first time that we'd seen it in practice. And then there we were in 2016, and some parts of the industry hit level 2 BIM. So it's this glacially slow rate of change from where we were in 2002 to where we are in 2016. We have to learn, and we have to get better at transforming in the future. And for me, one of the big lessons was around actually we hadn't given any attention to the soft skills, the socio-technical skills that we needed to use a technology that is relatively rudimentary, because BIM has been in use in other industries since the 1980s. So it wasn't the technology, it was the soft skills.
And it's worth, it's right to say that the Avanti project actually represented the approach to collaboration rather than a strict set of guidelines. Is that fair enough to say?
First attempt to work collaboratively and set some sort of standards around collaborative working and share information openly across the supply chain. So we had a number of demonstration projects, and we had many of the large construction firms signed up to what in effect was an action research project. So they were collaborating, they were working together, and we were sharing the findings.
Yeah, and those case studies are really compelling. When I was writing about BIM, obviously Avanti is very much seen as the foundation of what became PAS 1192 standards, and it's very well respected in industry. In terms of those case studies and the, I guess in summary, the lessons that you can take forward, was it mainly around that idea of improving socio-technical skills in industry? What other aspects do you carry forward? Yeah,
that was one of the major takeaways, and it was also around, as you say, establishing the need for standards to allow the supply chain to work together collaboratively. And without those, the supply chain is all over the place, and they revert into adversarial ways of working. And we can't do digital working and BIM without collaboration. So we've used the Harvard method with students and with executives. It's slightly different, obviously, in both cases. But essentially, we've written some teaching cases that are set in the built environment, all of which are openly available. But as Digital Lab, we've done that. And we've delivered it to groups of executives most recently. And essentially, they get some homework. They have to read the case. They have to answer a number of assignment questions. And then Eleni and I lead very interactive sessions, highly participatory, where essentially we, rather than being the sort of guru and lecturing them and telling them the answer, they come up with the answers. So we very much guide the discussion, and we incorporate a number of highly participative exercises. We may loop it back to theory and best practice at the end, but as a lot of it is drawing on their own experiences and their own expertise. And particularly when you're teaching executives, obviously they have a lot of those.
Yeah.
So it's a very rewarding method of teaching, both for the participants and the students, and for us.
The other important aspect of the case teaching is that because of the way that it's organized, they start becoming a community and create a scenario for a real workplace dilemma, for example, or situation. So it's very collaborative, and it's like learning by doing. So then you have a dilemma, and you confront the class with this dilemma. What would you do? So if you were so-and-so in this case, what would you do? Yeah. So it's important also to have protagonists in these cases, because this is what relates a lot to the participants of these cases. Because just learning about events and data and what happened then and so on, without linking that to individual action, to decisions and to decision makers, I think it's a missed opportunity. So there's a lot of the element of having protagonists in the cases as well, which our participants can identify with potentially.
It's brilliant to hear. I think the in a number of the short courses and things that you've done, and what I've read of Digital Outlook, it is that balance of theory and practice, and getting that experience from industry, and that combination of the two. Eleni, I'm interested in one thing that you mentioned earlier, which was around supply chain management and the collaboration, perhaps, that needs to be right across the board in the built environment. Of the organizations and the executives and those that you're including in the work, how are you finding the balance across the whole supply chain?
Yeah, even before that, in construction, projects are the main organizational vessel to get money. So it's a project business model, if we can say that, which is hard because of the short-term character of the project, whereas the organization has the long-term view. And typically this is where misunderstandings happen, because sometimes leaders think that, okay, this is just a project, this is just a one-off client, just a one-off supply chain. I don't need to do anything to invest there. I don't need to teach them anything. We just need to do this and get it done and then go to the next one. So this is a challenge in the short-termism that happens sometimes in projects, and especially in our sector. And this is why supply chain management should become more strategic, because if you have a more strategic view of the supply chain, then you have already your collaborators who are going to help you deliver a project, and they might be already aligned to your vision, to the way that you do things, to the technologies that they are using, for example. So this is very important as well. So sometimes it's associated with just reducing costs, but it's more than that.
Yeah.
So it's a network is your ecosystem. So you need to be able to take care of your ecosystem in order to do well in business.
That's such a great observation. Yeah, I really like that.
I've scribbled a little note down, Paul, which is relevant to that, which is it's something we often come across, actually. So the teaching cases that we have developed and we're using are different to case studies. So case studies often give the answer, well, this is what happened. Teaching cases that we're using are all about scenarios, unfinished managerial dilemmas.
That's an important.
That's a really important distinction to make. The second thing is that while there are loads of teaching cases about different dilemmas that you can use, what was missing were any that directly addressed the built environment industry. And that is the gap that we have tried to fill.
That's brilliant.
We have seen a lot of interest from business leaders to understand more about that, because, as explained, there is a gap, especially in the executive or middle management level, with new skills or new ideas coming into the market. What happens with the people who already have the know-how and the operation experience? So there is certainly a gap there in the middle management and the executive level to help them develop. We've seen a lot of interest in the past months, despite COVID as well. I think the only challenge that COVID has created was this over-reliance in Zoom and Teams and these types of meetings that for many people it's very hard to do another one of those. So hopefully in the future, when things become better, then they would be even more accessible to do either online or face-to-face trainings as well.
Yeah, I was reading this morning, obviously Zoom fatigue has obviously been a huge issue in terms of people, having to work online, to have meetings online, having to have their cameras on, all those things that have created new anxieties. People were saying that the next, great issue is going to be time poverty, and that we are completely changing the working day, the flexibility of being kind of always on and needing to carve out time, to do the tasks that perhaps would have been much more allocated to an evening or a weekend previously. So yeah, I'm fascinated by how the industry, but also the world evolves. if there's a particular piece of research or something that you're currently working on that you'd want to draw people's attention to, what would that be?
Great opportunities for the future in the built environment is going to be how agendas come together. So at the moment, we very much have a digital agenda, we have a net zero agenda, we have a value agenda. So it's really about how we bring those together more effectively. And there is some work, well, one of the teaching cases that Eleni actually led last year with Skanska was about exactly that, was how the net zero challenge was going to be achieved across their supply chain. And there are some other projects that are under development at the moment, which do exactly that, which are trying to link those agendas more clearly.
I fully agree with Beth. So there is a lot of the different agendas, the digital, the net zero, the MMC, all these different agendas and how they come together. Something that I've recently started thinking also about has to do with well-being in the sector as well. Job satisfaction being one of those. So is digital really helping us? How it can help us more to be proud and to really like the industry that we are in. It's not an industry that's very good at attracting people, so perhaps we need to understand more about how to improve that. So this is some new ideas I'm working on. So if anyone listening who wants to contribute or discuss more, it would be great as well. Yes.
And Eleni, one of the other things that I know that you're involved in is the Construction Blockchain Consortium. And I wondered if you'd speak a little bit about your work there and what the possibilities you see for that entire industry almost.
Yeah, indeed. So Construction Blockchain Consortium, it's an industry-academia collaboration which has started at the Bartlett at UCL. And through this consortium, essentially, we're trying to bring together the industry and the academia to help, and also policymakers to help understand how we can take advantage of blockchain technology, especially around construction. We are aware of all the initiatives that have taken place to bring, like the ones that we discussed about Avanti as well, and to democratize more and bring BIM to the foreground. And so what we're trying to do at CBC is to bottom up to do the same, more or less, for blockchain technology. There's a lot of interest as well from outside construction. Again, this is a very interdisciplinary topic. Also, there is an issue again about ecosystems. So, and I think the blockchain technology will make these questions again very relevant. How open are we? How open or closed are our ecosystems? How easy it is to use open source technology? There are also the issues with different types of blockchains, the private, the public blockchains, all of these issues which have to do with trust across the industry, which are more the socio-technical, if you like, issues that I like to do more research about and understand.
That absolutely fascinates me, that idea that trust metrics and the way that, the golden thread of information, as it gets called, and the findings of the hacker report and other things, of how do we ensure integrity of information across the construction industry. And yeah, some of the work that's happening in there looks really fascinating. So yeah, I'll be one of the people looking to get involved there, I think. And who do you look to for inspiration? If you were, going to highlight somebody you follow on Twitter or a mentor or a hero of yours, who would they be?
I wouldn't like to name people, but I found it, I don't like to name drop, but there are a lot of good people out there who are also trying to train and to educate others, which is great to do this on their own, capacity, because I understand that has to do a lot with the capacity of people to participate in that.
That's brilliant.
I am going to name drop. So, but not from my industry. It's a lady. She actually she's a business professor at Harvard. A lady called Amy Edmondson, and she used to be actually, she trained as an engineer and she worked with Buckminster Fuller. And we've used some of her teaching cases, but she writes brilliantly, she teaches brilliantly, and she's very insightful. So she's writing a lot about teaming at the moment and psychological safety, which is incredibly relevant to our industry.
Well, clearly, one of the things that I'm really interested in terms of these conversations is things that the industry can do better. And if there were things that you were going to highlight, clearly there's so many issues from sustainability to equality, diversity, that we need to improve. Where are the things that you see the greatest need for improvement?
Paul, I mentioned a while ago that Eleni and I, when we met, we had a number of things in common. Of course, obviously, one of the things we have in common is that we're both female. And you also just then mentioned the magic word diversity. In construction, we have incredibly low equality levels amongst genders and amongst different races, particularly at more senior levels. And that's a thread that has gone throughout my career, and it's something that I feel, and I believe Eleni does, I feel really strongly about, that if the industry was going to focus on a particular area, apart from digital, it would be that. And the argument is not just a sort of moral one, that you should do it and you shouldn't discriminate. The argument is also a performance one, that at the moment most of our leaders come from 50% of society. So it makes sense that look at the other 50% and you'll get better leaders.
Absolutely, yeah, 100%.
Because of our discussion today, we have been focusing a lot on the digital side, which it is quite important. So we are very interested in that, but we are approaching that from a socio-technical perspective. So in the social aspect, I think there are also things that could become better in the sector. I echo all the things about diversity that we have discussed, and equality and inclusion. It has to do also a lot with the culture as well in the sector. So the culture, not only at inside companies and how they're organized, they tend to be more hierarchical, I think, in the built environment, but also outside the organizations and how organizations compete versus collaborate. So I think all these ideas, they have to do a bit with the cultural change that we continuously say that construction needs. So perhaps something to start from there as well.
Yeah, the diversity and equality one, it really fascinates me. And I think every one of the conversations I've had with both climate literacy and diversity and equality, everybody's noted the problem and can highlight where the issues are. But I suppose it is about those in senior roles and with the influence and the authority to do it, beginning to provide those opportunities in more equitable and diverse ways. And I hope that as we come out of the pandemic, that the results include a more flexible approach to all kinds of lifestyle, ways of working, that hopefully opens up the industry to more people. That's certainly one of my hopes, which leads neatly onto what's always my final question, which is what your hopes for the future are as well. So whether that's your personal goals in research, whether it's industry improvements, whether it's about the industry itself, what are your hopes for the future?
I think from an industry perspective, it is this thing about bringing agendas together, that we use digital, we achieve net zero, we become much better at that, because there's no question that we need to become much more sustainable, and that we become much more value-based. From a personal point of view, I have a 15-year-old daughter doing her GCSEs at the moment, and I would like to see her having all the opportunities that her male peers have. That's whether in the construction industry or not. So
What I want to keep doing, it's to be relevant, to do things that have impact, and hopefully being able to improve the industry, to be able to disseminate my research and change also some of these cultures that we have been discussing. So that's my greatest reward, if you would say, from my work. So that's what I want to keep doing. Personally, I know that it's not particularly surprising, but the COVID situation has impacted all of us in many, many different ways. So I'm not looking for getting back to where we were, but I'm just looking, hopefully, to go to a situation that would be best for most of us and there would be any suffering. So that would be, at a personal level, I'm looking forward to that.
That is wonderful. Thanks so much to both of you for your time today. I really do appreciate it.
Pleasure. Really enjoyed it.
Thanks for the invitation. Great to be here.
A really wonderful conversation. Thank you. Thanks again to Dr. Beth and Dr. Eleni for their insights and ideas as they develop the industry's current and future leaders and hopefully encourage the equality and inclusion our industry so desperately needs. I hope you've enjoyed it. Please subscribe to the podcast on your chosen listening platform and press like or leave a review if you can, helping more people to discover these episodes. If you have any feedback or suggestions, or you think that you have a unique perspective on digital construction and that we could have an interesting conversation, please contact us at podcast@thembs.com. Until our next episode, thanks and goodbye.